After I was brought back home by my wealthy biological parents, I dove headfirst into the family business, excited to prove myself. 2 days later, I had already lost $5 million. I was drowning in panic, completely out of my depth, when the fake heiress let out a sigh. "Forget it, I'll do it," she said. She stayed up all night, pulling off a miracle and turning the tide. Then came the lavish banquet. My parents insisted I perform a piano piece for the guests. After driving away 18 teachers in a row, I still couldn't play even "Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star." Just as I stood on the verge of a social death spiral, the fake heiress shook her head. "Forget it, I'll do it." She stepped up at the last minute, and left everyone stunned with her performance. Even when the greasy fiancé, who'd been promised to me since childhood, started making tasteless jokes and lewd comments, trying to pit us against each other, she bit her lip and began, "Forget it, I surged forward before she could finish. Smack. I slapped that sleazebag across the face and shoved a mop in his mouth. What kind of toad thinks he's worthy of laying a finger on my sister? Welcome to History channel. Subscribe to follow all our latest adventures. Story begins. My name is Belinda Nelson. I grew up in an orphanage. On the first day my wealthy biological parents brought me home, I pointed at the fake heiress, Charlotte Oldfield, and asked, "What about her?" No one answered. Mr. Oldfield only glanced at my face to confirm I was his daughter, then rushed back to his company. Madame Oldfield, elegant and poised, instructed the fake heiress to show me to my room. Even my 8-year-old younger brother, Oscar, looked me up and down with undisguised disdain, scoffed, and turned away. Only Charlotte, the girl who had lived in my place and enjoyed over 2 decades of luxury, smiled gently at me. She guided me through the house, explained everything in detail, and even asked if I needed anything else. Her every gesture was precise. Her lips curled at the perfect angle, like she'd been measured with a ruler. Graceful to the point of looking artificial. I kept my distance, wary and cold. She didn't seem to mind. At the end of it all, she quietly said, "In this family, I'm considered a valuable investment. Valuable things don't get thrown away." Her words sounded deep and cryptic. I couldn't quite follow. I figured she was just trying to sound smart on purpose, knowing I didn't have much formal education. What a poser. That evening, during dinner, Madame Oldfield suggested I try managing part of the family business. Mr. Oldfield frowned. Her? She doesn't know the first thing about business. She'll just screw everything up. Probably, Madame Oldfield replied in the same calm tone. Let her start in a branch company, just to get her feet wet. I had a strong feeling they looked down on me. And I wasn't about to take that sitting down. I wasn't an idiot. How bad could it go? I marched into the office the next day, full of confidence, ready to prove myself. And by the afternoon of day 2, I had already tanked a $5 million deal. I curled up in the office rocker, listening to my assistant sob while staring at a mountain of reports. I was on the verge of tears myself. 5 million. Gone. How could anyone mess up this badly? Just as I was about to spiral, Charlotte Oldfield arrived. Mom and Dad were worried, she said simply. They sent me to check in. My assistant, seeing her, practically lunged at her legs like a drowning person grabbing a life ring. Charlotte took the reports, skimmed through a few pages, then looked at me, huddled in the chair, trembling and lost. She sighed. I'll handle it. She stayed the whole night with a team she pulled together. By the time morning light crept in through the windows, she had fixed it. Every cent recovered. The staff cheered. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. She even ordered takeout for the overnight workers, calculated overtime pay, rearranged their leave schedules, and hired drivers to take everyone home safely. She was meticulous. Graceful. Damn near impossible not to admire. When the office finally quieted down, she leaned back in her chair, eyes closed, massaging her temples. She hadn't slept. Because of me. I stood nearby, awkward and guilty. She seemed to notice. Smiling softly, she said, Don't beat yourself up. You're new. Mistakes are part of learning. I hesitated, then asked, Was it like this for you when you started? She looked away. Skipped the question. Everything's fine now. Get some rest. I lowered my head. Some questions just weren't worth asking. Let's go home, she said, gently patting my shoulder. She smelled faintly of orchids. Wait. I called out as she turned to leave. She looked back, confused. I pressed my lips together, then bowed deeply. Thank you. Charlotte blinked, startled for a moment, then smiled. We're sisters. That's what sisters do. Even though the loss had been salvaged, word of the disaster still reached our parents. Only then did they seem to realize how much education I'd missed out on over the past 20 years. They stopped sending me to the company and instead brought in a swarm of tutors. I was now bombarded with upper-class knowledge every waking hour. In the morning, I nearly snapped a tendon stretching for dance class. In the afternoon, I dragged myself through posture lessons. Yesterday's economics terms still barely made sense, and today they were already buried under ancient history. Mentally and physically wrecked, I gently approached Madame Oldfield and told her I was struggling with the pace. She thought for a long time, then nodded. I understand. And then promptly added piano, vocal training, tea ceremony, and flower arranging to my schedule. Said it would cultivate my temperament. Yeah, right. At this point, I was convinced she was trying to drive me out of this house. I was barely hanging on, teetering at the edge of a breakdown, when Madame Oldfield announced that I would be performing a piano solo at our upcoming family reunion banquet, in just 2 weeks. This will be your official debut as the Oldfield heiress. It's crucial to make a good impression. For you. For the family. Just like that, my piano lessons went from 3 times a week to 3 times a day. After half a month of suffering through Heinen, Heir, and Czerny, my hands shook just trying to cut a steak at dinner. I stabbed at the plate in frustration, metal screeching against ceramic. Everyone turned to look. Country bumpkin, Oscar muttered with disgust. Go away. I'm not eating at the same table as you. I didn't even blink. Just kept fighting my losing battle against the very much dead cow on my plate. Mr. Oldfield coughed. Then a minute later, he coughed again. Probably a sore throat, I thought. Then came the sound of silverware crashing onto the floor. Probably just slipped from his hand. Belinda, Madame Oldfield suddenly called my name, her tone cool but edged. Don't provoke your father. I blinked. I didn't. If he wants to be mad, how's that my fault? Mr. Oldfield's chest was visibly heaving, his temper about to boil over, when Madame Oldfield quickly shifted the topic. How's your piano coming along? The air instantly got heavier. I said nothing, just kept cutting at my steak. Mr. Oldfield's restraint snapped. The banquet is tomorrow. Word's already out that the Oldfield heiress will be performing. What are you going to do? Humiliate all of us by playing Twinkle Twinkle Little Star in front of everyone? I was already numb. You think I can even play that? That did it. Mr. Oldfield slammed his hand on the table and shot up, finger trembling as he pointed at me. Seizure, maybe. Then Charlotte, who had been eating quietly all this time, finally sighed and said, I'll do it. They only said an Oldfield daughter would perform. They never said which one. It should be fine. Before either parent could react, Oscar scoffed. You're not even one of us. Just a fake. Who gave you the right to represent our family? I had tolerated that brat long enough. I rolled up my sleeves, ready to show him just how effective bloodline suppression could be when applied directly to the backside. But Charlotte placed a calm hand on my shoulder and gave a small shake of her head. Then she looked toward our parents. Mr. Oldfield sat down with a grunt. What else can we do? Madame Oldfield seemed conflicted. Her gaze slid to me. Belinda, Charlotte's trying to help you. Don't resent her for stealing your spotlight. That was a strange thing to say. Resent her? For saving my ass? What kind of idiot would I have to be to blame her for that? The banquet went ahead as planned. My parents announced my identity to the media and clarified that Charlotte would remain part of the family, as their adopted daughter. Charlotte, as poised as ever, ignored the whispers about her and walked to the piano without hesitation. In front of the whole room, In the midst of hushed speculation, music flowed from her fingertips. Soft, elegant, magnetic. After 2 weeks of fighting that instrument like it was a mortal enemy, I finally realized the piano wasn't meant to sound like a battlefield. In her hands, the black and white keys became silk, smooth, effortless, hypnotic. If anything in that moment was more beautiful than the piece she played, it was her. Charlotte wore a deep blue gown, speckled with tiny crystals. Under the stage lights, she looked like a still lake under a starry sky. And when she played, a breeze rippled across that lake, gentle waves dancing in the light. She was radiant. When the final note faded, she stood and bowed. Applause erupted. Reporters swarmed forward. They asked the usual. What was her relationship to me? Was she upset about the shift in status? Charlotte answered gracefully, giving them nothing juicy to work with. So they turned to Oscar instead. Which sister do you prefer? One reporter asked, clearly fishing for a quote. Oscar rolled his eyes. Mom said the family fortune's all mine. Once I'm of age, I'm kicking both of them out of the house. The entire banquet hall froze. But Oscar remained blissfully unaware of the social grenade he had just lobbed. One's a stray mutt, the other's a hillbilly. Neither of them deserved to be my sister. I stepped forward, silent. My knuckles cracked as I clenched my fists. He still had the nerve to glare at me. What? Hillbilly? You mad? Charlotte touched my shoulder gently, her voice low. Don't take it to heart. The more attention you give him, the worse it'll feel. I brushed her hand off and looked her in the eyes. Sometimes the only way to shut up a barking dog is to beat it until it's scared of the sound of its own voice. And with that, I lunged. One quick grab. Oscar was in my grip. I hoisted him off the ground and swung my arm high. Smack. The sharp, echoing crack of my palm against his backside was louder than the music had been. The room went utterly still. Oscar froze. The sting hit a second later, but the shame, the raw, gut-twisting humiliation came first. He flailed. He screamed. He kicked and cursed. I kept swinging. That's for your filthy mouth. And that's for thinking you're better than people. You think I want to be your sister? I'd rather lick the floor. If I don't beat your ass till it's blooming like a damn cherry tree, you'll never learn why flowers are red. The smacks came like a rhythm, turning his curses into howls of surrender. Nobody moved. Not a soul dared interrupt. Except the reporters. Their eyes gleamed. Cameras clicked non-stop. They were already drafting tomorrow's headline. Oldfield family reunion erupts. Real daughter publicly spanks young master. Oh, it was going to be a viral masterpiece. As expected, the next day, every major media outlet was flooded with high-definition videos of me spanking Oscar Oldfields, but until it turned red. By nightfall, the internet was already saturated with remixed meme clips and emoji packs of my disciplinary performance. Mr. Oldfield slammed the table so hard the entire dining set rattled. His face had turned a deep liver-colored shade of fury. Outrageous! This is utterly outrageous, he bellowed. Oscar is still a child. He doesn't know better. You, as his older sister, didn't step in to smooth things over, and instead you made a public spectacle of it. Have you considered what this does to the Oldfield family's reputation? Madame Oldfield's face turned frosty. Her eyes, once merely indifferent, now brimmed with something darker. Disgust, perhaps even loathing. You went too far. We're deeply disappointed in you. I didn't know how to talk back. Never been good with words, so I just stiffened my neck and let them yell. Worst case, I'd pack my things and walk out of this house. Apparently, my like a dead pig not afraid of boiling water attitude only pushed Mr. Oldfield further off the edge. He strode toward me, hand raised, about to turn this into a case of domestic violence. Charlotte rushed forward to stop him. I was already balling my fists, ready to fight back, when suddenly his phone rang. Mr. Oldfield glanced at the screen, and his face changed. Instantly. His fury evaporated. He straightened, composed himself, and answered the call with a forced smile and repeated deferential nods. Yes, of course. During the call, He even glanced up at me, eyes filled not with anger but concern. By the time he hung up, his face looked like he'd just swallowed a live bug. And then he dropped the bombshell. The heir of the Blackwell family, Ethan Blackwell, the very one who had been engaged to the Oldfield daughter since birth, was returning to the country. I was floored. Arranged marriages? Seriously? That feudal nonsense doesn't even happen in backwater villages anymore. And yet, here it was, being treated like a precious family heirloom by one of the city's wealthiest clans. Mr. Oldfield turned his gaze to me, frowning. Ethan Blackwell heard there was a change in his betrothed. He's flying back early. And he wants to meet you, Belinda. Immediately. Charlotte visibly paled, her usual composure slipping. But, the engagement has always been with me, she said, voice tight. I should. Charlotte. Madame Oldfield's voice cut through the air, cold and sharp. Mind your words. But, she tried again. But what? Mr. Oldfield snapped. That engagement was a business decision. A merger. Do you carry Oldfield blood? That shut her down. Charlotte looked up at me then, her eyes filled with complex sorrow. Mr. Oldfield turned back to me, his voice low but solemn. The Blackwells are untouchable. Even the Oldfield family must bow their heads. This meeting must go smoothly. No more screw-ups. No time for debate. Before I could respond, I was shoved into a car and driven straight to a tea room where Ethan Blackwell was already waiting. The whole time, I kept thinking about Charlotte's reaction. Why had she looked so devastated? Did she actually have feelings for this guy? If she truly liked him, I'd step aside. I wasn't the type to fight over a man, especially not with someone who saved my neck more than once. Sure, the families were dead set on this marriage, but if we worked something out in private, maybe we could undo it. With that thought in mind, I entered the private room, prepared to negotiate. And then he opened his mouth. I've heard all about you, he said, giving me a once-over with eyes that were already crawling over my body. Compared to your sister, I definitely like you more. His beady eyes narrowed with sleazy satisfaction. All those rich heiresses are the same. I've had more than I can count. They're boring. I could close my eyes and predict how your sister would be in bed. He chuckled, revoltingly. But you? You seem fun. My brain short-circuited. This was the man Charlotte couldn't forget? Was she under a spell? Luckily, my reflexes moved faster than my thoughts. Smack. My hand left a bright red imprint across his smug face. I didn't wait to see his reaction. I spun on my heel and stormed off. Behind me, I heard him laugh darkly. Now that's the kind of woman I like. Too bad for him, I wasn't heading for the door. I turned straight into the restroom, grabbed the first mop I saw, soaked it under the sink, and marched right back. His eyes widened. What are you? Whack. I slapped that dripping mop across his face. Back and forth. Who the hell do you think you are? You think a toad like you can eye my sister? Swish. Whap. You talk like garbage. Maybe scrubbing your teeth will help. That day, a legend was born. The Blackwell heir, arrogant, untouchable, above it all, left the private room in tears. His hair was soaked, his clothes disheveled, his face and neck splattered with suspicious red streaks. He wept to every staff member he passed. I'm dirty. I'll never be clean again. I can't face anyone. After we returned home, my parents, unsurprisingly, unleashed a torrent of scolding. They even ordered me to go to the Blackwell estate and apologize in person. As if I'd ever do that. It was clear, they'd run out of patience with me. They didn't even bother to argue anymore. Instead, they decided on punishment, confinement and fasting. A chance for me to reflect. Wow. I'm terrified. Oscar Oldfield, with his but still swollen from my earlier lesson, was being doted on like a fallen prince. Madame Oldfield had him admitted to the hospital for recovery, and stayed by his side the entire time. Mr. Oldfield? He was rarely ever home, but now he was practically invisible. With both parents gone, their punishment was laughable. The maids were told not to prepare food for me, and the security guards were ordered not to let me out, nor allow delivery drivers to bring food in. Hilarious, really. I rolled my eyes and strolled into the kitchen. In no time, I'd whipped up 4 dishes and a soup, plated them, and was about to dig in when Charlotte returned. She usually stayed at the company late whenever there wasn't a family dinner. I'd never seen her home this early. When our eyes met, she froze slightly. You cooked this yourself? I scratched my cheek, a bit embarrassed. Want to join me? It was meant to be polite, a throwaway line. But she actually pulled out a chair and sat down. So I served her a bowl. They were just ordinary home-style dishes. But Charlotte examined them as though they were rare delicacies, studying every color, every texture, every detail. The way she scrutinized my casual cooking like it was high art made even someone as thick-skinned as me feel self-conscious. I cleared my throat and mumbled, "You're back early today." She hesitated, then pulled a beautifully wrapped chestnut cake from her bag. "I was going to sneak this back for you." I stared at her, caught off guard. Warmth bloomed in my chest, but it was tinged with something bittersweet. This kind of punishment only works on little kids. Who would really? My voice caught in my throat as I looked at the cake. Did they used to lock you up when you were little? And not let you eat? She didn't answer. I didn't press. Instead, I ladled out a bowl of soup and gently slid it toward her. The spoon clinked softly against the bowl. Through the steam, I saw her eyes turn red. After a long silence, I cleared my throat and tried to steer the conversation elsewhere. "So, about the Blackwell engagement." "You don't need to worry," Charlotte said calmly, rubbing at her eyes as if it were nothing. "I'll convince Mom and Dad to let me take the engagement instead. You were reckless, sure, but you've definitely ruined your chances with the Blackwells. I'll go to them, apologize on behalf of the Oldfields. I'm sure." I couldn't hold it in anymore. "Are you blind? You really want to marry that man?" Charlotte frowned. She opened her mouth to reply, hesitated, then finally snapped. "Do you have to be so insulting? Then why are you so eager to marry him?" I shot back. But the words had barely left my mouth before I realized what I'd said. I froze, pointed to myself, and asked slowly, "You're doing this for me?" The air turned still. Charlotte avoided my eyes, but I reached out and grabbed her hand. "You think if you marry him, then I won't have to. Is that it?" Her lips trembled. "Mom and Dad won't give up the alliance with the Blackwells. One of us has to marry him. To hell with that." I snapped. "If someone needs to marry him so badly, let Mom or Dad do it themselves." "Come on." I stood abruptly, pulling her to her feet. "Let's go. Let's get away from this madhouse and never look back." Truthfully, I had no idea where we were going. She said she wanted to visit the orphanage I grew up in, so I booked us flights and a hotel. By the time the plane landed, it was already dark. We checked in first, and I took a hot shower, humming to myself with glee. I'd never felt so free, finally out of that oppressive Oldfield mansion. But Charlotte didn't seem nearly as thrilled. She was sitting on the carpet beside the couch, hugging her knees, staring blankly at her phone. I guess she'd gotten a call from home while I was in the shower. Drying my hair, I asked, "What did they say?" She gave a bitter smile. "Nothing pleasant." I sat beside her. "You don't have to listen to anything they say." She was quiet for a long time before murmuring, "They gave me everything. The best schools, the finest food, clothes, tutors. They invested so much in me. It's only fair I give something back." "But that something shouldn't be your life," I said firmly. "They raised you like an object, an expensive porcelain doll. Dressing you in jewels wasn't love. It was marketing, trying to get the highest bid. It doesn't have to be that way." "Charlotte," I said softly, "we're human. We feel pain. We feel joy. We're not cheap or expensive. We're not merchandise." It was the first time I'd ever called her Charlotte, with real affection. It made her freeze. For a long moment, her eyes shimmered like dew. Then she looked at me and asked, "Will you teach me how to cook?" The hotel suite had a small kitchenette, an induction stove and a non-stick pan. I ordered some basic ingredients and sauces from a nearby store. No frying, roasting, or baking. Too complicated. We went for 2 bowls of plain noodle soup with poached eggs. Simple. Inexpensive. Mediocre at best. I took a bite. The noodles were mushy. Too much salt. The egg had almost dissolved into the broth like a broken yolk swirl. I opened my mouth to suggest ordering takeout instead. But when I looked up, Charlotte was eating slowly, tears dripping silently into her already salty soup. I stood and walked to her side, wrapping my arms gently around her. She leaned into me, and the quiet sniffles turned into loud, choking sobs. I rubbed her back, eyes stinging, because I knew exactly what she was crying for. She was crying for all the nights locked in dark rooms, denied meals, punished with silence and scorn. For the cane strikes across her hands, the sharp words, the icy glares. She cried for the years that molded her into something dazzling and hollow. And now, for the first time, she was free to cry. Freely, openly, without shame. No more rehearsed smiles with perfect angles. Just tears. Let them fall. Let her cry until her eyes swell, her throat goes hoarse. Let her release every tear she had ever swallowed as a child, all at once. The next day, I took Charlotte Oldfield to the orphanage where I grew up. I was in high spirits, giving her a tour and eagerly pointing out where I used to sleep, where we lined up for meals, where I once got stuck trying to climb a tree. She listened with a quiet smile, then waved her hand, and donated a generous sum to the orphanage. When I introduced her to the director, I said, "This is my sister." Hearing that I'd finally found my family, the director was overjoyed. She couldn't help but reminisce. "When you first arrived, you were so tiny. Barely weaned. Now look at you, so grown up." She rarely brought up how we ended up here. Probably didn't want to make us sad. But since she started, I couldn't help asking, "Who brought me here?" "Was it the police?" She shook her head. "It was a man, had a scar above his brow. He wore a mask and handed the baby over without saying much. Just that he'd found you. Then he ran off. We couldn't catch him. Never found out who he was." Charlotte's expression shifted. She quickly pulled out her phone and flipped to a photo. "Was it this man?" Both the director and I were stunned. If Charlotte recognized the man who left me at the orphanage, then I hadn't just gotten lost. I'd been taken, and abandoned on purpose. The director grew serious, studying the photo carefully. "He does look like him. But it's been almost 20 years. I can't be sure." Charlotte remained silent the entire car ride back to the hotel. Her brows were furrowed the whole way. I couldn't stand the suspense. "Who was that man?" She hesitated, then finally answered, "A friend of Mom's." My eyes widened in disbelief. Did that mean Madame Oldfield had known all along? I looked at Charlotte. She looked back. "Do you want to go back?" she asked, "and get the truth?" "Of course," I said. Word must have spread the moment we stepped off the plane. The Oldfield family had eyes everywhere. Not long after, Mr. Oldfield called. Just 2 words. "Come home." The atmosphere at the Oldfield estate was heavy, like a thunderstorm just before it breaks. Charlotte and I stood side by side while Mr. and Madame Oldfield sat on the couch, their expressions identical, tight-lipped, stone-cold. The silence was first broken by none other than Oscar Oldfield, freshly released from the hospital. He came charging at me like a gremlin. "Get out! Both of you! All the money's mine. I won't let you back into this house." I almost laughed. "Still got guts, huh? After crying like a baby last time?" What he had in guts, he lacked in brains. I grabbed him by the waist, ready to reenact the banquet scene and give him a matching bruise on the other cheek. "Let him go." Madame Oldfield, usually so composed, snapped, rushing forward and yanking Oscar into her arms. Her eyes burned with rage. "Ever since you came back to this house, there hasn't been a day of peace. Maybe I never should have given birth to you." I shrugged. "So put me back where you found me." My apathy only seemed to infuriate her more. But instead of continuing with me, She turned to Charlotte. And you? I could understand it from her, but you? You followed her nonsense and vanished, left everything in ruins. We gave you the best of everything. Education, resources, connections. And this is how you repay us? You don't deserve to be called a daughter of the Oldfield family. Charlotte met her gaze head-on. I'm not an investment. I'm a person. People aren't machines. We can't be expected to obey blindly and work without protest. If that disappoints you, then perhaps your expectations were never realistic. Her voice was calm but resolute. Madame Oldfield stood frozen for a moment, lips slightly parted in disbelief, as if this was the first time she had truly seen Charlotte. The first time she'd ever heard her speak like a person. And then, enough! Mr. Oldfield's voice cracked like a whip across the room. The whole house went silent. He ignored me completely, looking straight at Charlotte. The Blackwells made themselves clear. They will never accept Belinda Nelson. That leaves only one option. Charlotte opened her mouth to refuse, but he didn't let her. He grabbed his coat and stormed to the door. While slipping on his shoes, he turned back and gave Charlotte a cold final look. We raised you this long. It's time you repaid us. The door slammed behind him. The house fell quiet again. Madame Oldfield stood and carried Oscar away. But as she left, she tossed one final sentence over her shoulder. You won't escape. Even if we have to drag you there in chains, you will marry into the Blackwell family. Charlotte closed her eyes, forcing her emotions down. I leaned in, whispering, Don't you think Madame Oldfield's being strange? Maybe it was the weight of everything we just learned, but now every look, every word of hers seemed suspicious. It was like she wanted both Charlotte and me out of the house. If we were gone, all the inheritance would go to Oscar. She'd always favored him. Before I thought it was just old-fashioned sexism. But now, I opened my palm. In it were a few strands of Oscar's hair. Freshly plucked. Remember when they brought me home? They still have the DNA samples, right? Soon after, Mr. Oldfield organized a private banquet, supposedly for me to apologize to Ethan Blackwell. In truth, it was just an excuse to get Charlotte and Ethan alone together. At the table, Mr. Oldfield played the part of the gracious host, pouring drinks, laughing too loud, flattering every Blackwell in the room. They were all smiles, slapping Ethan on the back, saying, The engagement was arranged long ago. Let the young ones talk. We old folks will only make them nervous. One by one, the adults left the room, leaving only me, Charlotte, and Ethan Blackwell. They wanted me gone too, but I pretended not to hear. Mr. Oldfield couldn't scold me in front of the Blackwells, so he could only sit there and pray I didn't cause a scene. Ethan was already tipsy. He reached for Charlotte, tears in his eyes, practically sobbing into her shoulder. I used to think you were boring. But now I see, women should be obedient. You're perfect. I'll marry you. I couldn't take it anymore. I rolled up my sleeves, ready to knock him straight through the table. Ethan flinched. Traumatized, no doubt, by our last encounter. But just as I stepped forward, Charlotte raised a hand and stopped me. In Ethan's hopeful, desperate eyes, she smiled, poised, graceful, and slapped the hell out of him. The crack echoed like a firecracker. My sister taught me, she said calmly, dusting her hand. When dogs start barking, don't argue. Beat them until the sound of your raised hand makes them shut up on instinct. I puffed out my chest with pride. Damn right. I taught her that. Charlotte stood, voice cutting through the room like a blade. Now get lost. Unless you want me to go fetch the mop. Ethan Blackwell ran bawling into his family's arms, tears and snot streaming down his face, wailing that he never wanted to get married again. Women are terrifying, he sobbed. The Blackwells panicked. Within days, he was sent abroad and placed under the care of one of the world's top psychiatrists for his sudden onset of gynophobia. All ties with the Oldfield family were immediately and decisively severed. Mr. Oldfield was incandescent with rage. He raised his hand, about to strike Charlotte. How did the Oldfield family raise such a reckless, foolish daughter? Do you have any idea what you've done? I leapt forward and grabbed his wrist, flinging it back with force. And I want to know what kind of father you are, trying to marry off your daughter to a sleazy coward like that. Already pushing his mid-50s and battling high blood pressure, Mr. Oldfield stumbled backward, nearly collapsing. Clutching the back of a chair for support, he gasped for breath, his trembling finger pointing at both Charlotte and me. You, get out. Get out of the Oldfield house. Madame Oldfield's face was as icy as a glacier. You've gone too far. Pack your things. I never want to see either of you here again. Charlotte stepped forward. I imagine you must be quite pleased, Mother. Now that we're both being cast out, all of the inheritance goes to your precious son. But I think, she added, there's something Father deserves to know. She reached into her bag and pulled out a thin folder. A DNA test, proof that Oscar Oldfield was not Mr. Oldfield's biological child. Mr. Oldfield stared at the paper. His expression darkened with every passing second. When he finally looked up at Oscar, his gaze was sharp enough to draw blood. Even Oscar, dim-witted as he was, sensed danger and took 2 steps back. Madame Oldfield immediately jumped in front of him, her face white as chalk. Smack. A crisp, brutal slap landed across Madame Oldfield's cheek. Mr. Oldfield roared like a wounded beast. How dare you? After all these years, after everything I gave you, how dare you? She staggered sideways from the force of it, blood at the corner of her lips. Oscar began to cry, but Madame Oldfield suddenly laughed. You think you treated me well? She said, breathless with fury. Marrying me was like buying a vase. Something pretty to display. Meanwhile, how many mistresses have you kept outside this house? When I was in labor with our first child, you were vacationing on some island with your side woman. Did you ever once look at me like I was a person? Her words were hoarse with rage. The mask of elegance she'd worn for decades had been torn off, revealing raw, festering pain beneath. I hated you. Every second. I hated you so much I wanted to crawl out of my own skin. Even the children I had with you made me sick. She turned her venom on me. You should never have been born. Don't even dream of me treating you like my daughter. You don't deserve even a scrap of my love. I shrugged. That's fine. I don't like you either. You had the guts to swap children, hide the truth, plot behind everyone's backs, but you never had the guts to walk away from this house. Never once said no to the engagement. Never filed for divorce. You just stayed. For the power, for the image. You're not some master manipulator, I said coldly. You're just a coward in a gilded cage. And after all these years, you still care more about what people might whisper behind your back than what you actually want. You look like a clever fool. In the aftermath, Mr. and Madame Oldfield were consumed by a messy divorce. Charlotte used the opportunity to set up her own company and officially cut ties with the Oldfields. Madame Oldfield left the house with Oscar and no money to her name, planning to leave the city entirely. One afternoon, I sat curled in a rocking chair, surrounded by a mountain of financial reports, trying not to cry as my assistant wailed about our burn rate. And there she was again. Madame Oldfield, still dignified, still composed, as if that day of screaming and weeping had been a dream. She asked how Charlotte was doing. Charlotte answered evenly. It's a startup. Nothing like the Oldfield empire, but it's mine. I'm in control. Madame Oldfield held her teacup tightly, though she never took a sip. Ripples shimmered across the surface. She had spent her whole life in a cage and thought her feathers were just ornaments. When she finally broke down, she did so by tearing them off and staining the cage in blood, mistaking destruction for freedom. But today she saw another bird, one who'd flown out, wings stretched wide into the blue, every feather gleaming and whole. As she stood to leave, she turned to me and quietly said, I'm sorry for what I said to you that day. I didn't mean most of it. I smiled faintly. No need to apologize. I meant every word I said. I really don't like you. She gave a bitter laugh and turned to go. I called out, Wait, what should I call you now? You're not Mrs. Oldfield anymore, right? As for Mr. Oldfield, So desperate for a son, he treated parenthood like a sport. He filled his life with women, hoping one would win by giving him an heir. One of them tried a little too hard and slipped him something pharmaceutical. A single pill later, he was partially paralyzed from a stroke. No more heirs. No more anything. He now lives full-time in a care home. And just like that, I became the sole heir of the Oldfield fortune. Of course, given my glorious record of losing $5 million in 2 days, I only kept what I needed to survive. The rest? I created a foundation. We help orphanages. We track down missing children. We help them find home. Charlotte was surprised. I thought you'd be done with family altogether. I shook my head. No. I mean, sure, my biological mom, dad, and little brother were all trash. But now I have you, don't I? She blinked, caught off guard. Then she smiled. Really smiled. Not the elegant rehearsed smile she always wore, trained to perfection. This one was real. Warm. Joyful. The kind of smile that crinkles your eyes. What do you want for dinner? She asked. I'll cook. I laughed.